The Galactic Union sprawled across thousands of light years, encompassing hundreds of species linked by a delicate framework of alliances, treaties, and mutual interests. For centuries, this confederation had maintained a tenuous peace among the stars, despite occasional border skirmishes and diplomatic tensions. At its edges, new colonies sprouted on habitable worlds, bearing the hopes and dreams of their founding species. Nameless was one such world, a verdant paradise only recently colonized by the Aryan people. Its azure oceans and emerald continents promised a bright future for the settlers. The Aryans, known throughout the Union for their advanced biotechnology and elegant architecture, had established thriving settlements across Namelus's main continent. Their structures, graceful spirals of gleaming white composite materials, stood in harmonious contrast to the planet's natural beauty. But paradise came with a price. Distance from a Union core worlds meant limited defensive capabilities. The newly established orbital defense grid consisted of just 3 platforms, with a small complement of interceptor craft housed in a single spaceport. The colony's leadership had deemed this sufficient. After all, the Galactic Union had kept the peace for generations. Dr. Neela Varys stood at the observation deck of Namelus's central research facility, her slender fingers tapping nervously on the railing as she stared at the holographic display. As chief science officer and the technical leader of the colony, she had access to all sensor data, and what she was seeing chilled her to the core. "Can we get confirmation on those readings?" she asked, her normally measured voice betraying a tremor. Her assistant verified what she already feared. Multiple ships dropping out of FDL at the system's edge. Configuration unknown, but energy signatures are consistent with Siraki vessels. The name sent a ripple of fear through the room. The Siraki, a predatory species known for their ruthless resource acquisition and biological harvesting operations. They descended upon vulnerable worlds, stripped them of resources, and often took captives for their horrific biological experiments. Worlds visited by the Siraki were rarely left habitable. "Alert Commander Oris immediately," Neela ordered, already moving toward the communications array, "and begin emergency evacuation procedures for all civilian areas." Commander Rylan Oris received the alert while conducting routine security drills with his team. The former Union naval officer had taken the assignment on Namelus seeking peace after years on the frontier, never expecting to face a real threat here. Now, watching the tactical display as multiple hostile ships approached, he felt his military training resurge. "All units to defensive positions," he ordered through the command network. "Initiate civilian shelter protocols. I want all non-essential personnel in the underground complexes within 30 minutes. He looked at the approaching ships, counting at least 15, including what appeared to be 3 heavy cruisers. Against Namelus's meager defenses, the outcome was a foregone conclusion. In the command center 20 minutes later, Neela and Rylan stood side by side, watching as the first orbital defense platform erupted in a ball of plasma. The Siraki hadn't even bothered with communications or demands. They had simply opened fire upon entering range. "Orbital Platform 1 is gone," a technician reported unnecessarily. 2 and 3 are targeting the lead vessels, but their shields are holding. How long until Union reinforcements could arrive? Neela asked, although she already knew the answer. Ryland's face was grim. 4 days at minimum. The nearest battle group is in the Cygnus sector. A second explosion bloomed in orbit as another defense platform succumbed to the Siraki assault. The technicians worked frantically at their stations, but the atmosphere was one of rapidly dwindling hope. "We need to send a distress signal," Neela said firmly. "The standard Union emergency band is already active," one of the communications officers reported. "No," Neela replied, her golden eyes narrowing with determination. "I mean the quantum beacon." The room fell silent. Even Rylan looked at her with surprise. "The quantum beacon is forbidden technology," he said quietly. "Union protocols restrict its use to only the most dire." "Look around you, Commander," Neela interrupted, gesturing to the tactical display showing the Saraki ships methodically destroying Namelus's defenses. If this doesn't qualify as dire, what does? The quantum beacon was one of the most closely guarded secrets of advanced Union worlds. Unlike conventional transmissions, which traveled at light speed, quantum entangled communications were instantaneous across any distance. But they came with risks. The energy signature was distinctive and could potentially reveal the location of hidden Union outposts or secret facilities. Its use was strictly regulated. Rylan hesitated only a moment longer before nodding. Do it. Neela moved to a secure terminal, entering a series of authorization codes. A small panel opened in the console, revealing a crystalline device pulsing with soft blue light. She placed her palm against it, and the crystal responded to her biometric signature. This is Dr. Neela Varys of the Aryan colony Namelus. She spoke clearly into the device. We are under heavy attack by Saraki forces. Orbital defenses failing. Civilian population at imminent risk. Requesting immediate assistance from any Union vessels in range. I repeat, this is an emergency quantum beacon broadcast from Namelus. Please help us. The crystal flashed once brightly, then returned to its steady pulsing. The message would propagate instantly across thousands of light years, reaching every quantum receiver in the Galactic Union simultaneously. Now we wait, Ryland said, but his expression held little hope. Even if the message was received immediately, physical help would still take days to arrive. Will anyone even hear it? One of the younger technicians asked, voicing the fear they all shared. Someone will hear, Neela answered firmly. Whether they arrive in time is another matter. Far across the galaxy, in a vast orbital complex that served as the Galactic Union's administrative headquarters, the quantum beacon's signal arrived with a priority alert that interrupted an ongoing assembly. Representatives from dozens of species looked up in surprise as the message from Namelus played throughout the chamber. Ambassador Laura Jen, a tall, willowy figure from the peaceful Alarian species, was the first to speak. We must dispatch aid immediately. The Saraki have broken the Outer Rim Treaty. A hulking representative of the militaristic Tauran species growled in disagreement. The nearest battle group would take 4 days to reach Namelus. By then, the colony will be stripped clean. We would be risking ships and lives for nothing. So we abandon them? Laura demanded, her luminescent skin pulsing with emotion. We make strategic decisions, the Tauran replied coldly. Namelus is a minor colony on the frontier. Regrettable, but not worth compromising Union fleet positioning. Similar debates erupted throughout the chamber as species aligned based on their own interests and alliances. Some called for immediate action, others for caution, and still others, particularly those with historical grievances against the Aryans, for complete non-intervention. Admiral Jorix, the Union fleet commander, finally brought order to the chaos. I have already ordered a rapid response team to prepare for departure. They can reach Namelus in just under 4 days. However, I must be realistic. That may not be soon enough to save the colony. Back on Namelus, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The last orbital platform fell within the hour, and Saraki landing craft began their descent toward the surface, targeting the main settlement areas. Commander Rylan organized his security forces, barely 300 trained personnel, to create defensive perimeters around the civilian shelters. They were armed primarily with standard-issue pulse rifles and a few portable shield generators, pitifully inadequate against Saraki combat technology. Hold this line, he instructed his team leaders. We need to buy time for as many civilians as possible to reach the deep shelters. The first Saraki ground forces they encountered were even more terrifying in person than in the briefing recordings. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, their exoskeletal armor seemed to be partially fused with their bodies. Multiple limbs wielded advanced weapons while sensory appendages swiveled constantly, seeking prey. They moved with horrifying speed and precision. The defenders' first volley of pulse fire was largely absorbed by the Saraki personal shields. Return fire cut down a dozen Aryan security officers in seconds. Rylan ordered a tactical retreat, using the colony's buildings as cover. "Fall back to position 3, he commanded through his comm unit. "Utilize urban corridors for ambush points. Use the terrain." Throughout the main settlement, scenes of horror unfolded as Saraki troops methodically advanced. They weren't simply killing, they were capturing. Specialized units wielded devices that immobilized Aryan civilians, who were then dragged to collection points for transport to the Saraki ships. Neela had remained in the command center, coordinating what remained of the colony's technological defenses, with communications severely compromised by Saraki jamming. She led a team of engineers attempting to restore local satellite links. "If we can reconfigure the weather monitoring satellites, we might be able to bounce signals through their network," she explained, hands flying over the controls. "It won't give us much, but at least we'll have some communication capacity beyond direct line of sight." A young engineer looked up from his station. "Dr. Varus, I've managed to get partial sensor feed from the agricultural district. The Saraki, they're gathering civilians, but they're also collecting biological samples from our hydroponics bays and gene banks. That confirms our intelligence on their operations," Neela said grimly. "They don't just want our resources, they want our genetic material, our biological innovations. The Saraki enhance themselves by incorporating traits from other species. Is that why they're taking prisoners instead of just killing everyone?" another technician asked. "Yes," Neela replied softly, "and those taken rarely survive the process. The Saraki leave nothing behind when they're finished." At the Union headquarters, the debate had intensified. A faction led by the Tauran military delegation argued that sending a small, fast-response team ahead of the main battle group would be a waste of resources. If the main fleet cannot arrive in time to save the colony, sending a vanguard force simply provides the Saraki with more targets, the Tauran representative insisted. Ambassador Laura Jin stood her ground. A small, faster fleet might at least succeed in evacuating some of the colonists. Are we truly willing to abandon thousands of lives without even trying? The Aryan knew the risks of establishing a colony so far from protected space. A reptilian delegate hissed. Resources allocated to a failed rescue attempt could be better utilized, strengthening defenses for other vulnerable systems. As the arguments continued, a communications officer interrupted with startling news. "The quantum beacon from Nameless has received a response, but not from any Union vessel." The chamber fell silent. The response was brief. The officer continued. "Just, we have received. We are on our way. Origin unknown. Our monitoring systems cannot identify the source." Admiral Jorix demanded, "Is it possible the Saraki themselves intercepted the quantum signal?" "Unlikely, Admiral. Saraki have never demonstrated quantum communication technology. This came from somewhere else." The revelation sent a new wave of unease through the assembly. Someone, or something, outside the Union's knowledge had intercepted a secure quantum transmission and was now heading toward Nameless. On the besieged planet, night had fallen over the main continent. Fires burned throughout the settlement as Saraki methodically destroyed infrastructure after stripping it of valuable technology. Commander Rylan had consolidated his remaining forces around the entrance to the largest civilian shelter, a massive underground complex originally designed as a research facility. "We've lost contact with the Western District entirely," his second-in-command reported. "Security teams 3 and 7 are not responding." Rylan studied the tactical display on his wrist unit. Of his original 300 officers, fewer than 80 remained operational. They had managed to slow the Saraki advance through guerrilla tactics and knowledge of the terrain, but they were steadily losing ground. "How many civilians made it to the shelters?" he asked. "Approximately 60% of the colony population. The rest are either captured or—" The officer didn't finish the sentence. Rylan nodded grimly. "We hold this position as long as possible. If we're overrun, initiate the shelter sealing protocol. At least those inside might survive until help arrives." If help arrives, he thought but didn't say. In the command center, Now operating on emergency power, Neela received an unexpected transmission from what remained of their orbital sensors. Dr. Varus, we're detecting new ships entering the system. The sensor operator reported with surprise. But they're not Union configurations. Neela rushed to the display. Saraki reinforcements? No, I don't recognize these signatures at all. They're unlike anything in our database. The tactical display showed several objects moving at incredible speed toward Nameless, far faster than any Union or Saraki vessel should be capable of traveling within a star system. Can you get visual confirmation? Neela asked, a mix of hope and dread rising within her. The operator worked the controls, attempting to focus long-range optical sensors. The screen flickered and then resolved to show the approaching vessels. Unlike the angular, insectoid design of Saraki ships or the smooth curves of Union craft, these are something else entirely. Their hulls appear to be made of a material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making their precise contours difficult to discern. They were uniformly dark, with occasional pulses of energy visible along their length like veins of lightning within storm clouds. What are they? Neela whispered. Unknown, but they'll reach Nameless orbit in approximately 17 minutes at current velocity. Neela made a quick decision. Alert Commander Oris immediately, and try to establish communication with those vessels. The operator sent the signal, but shook his head. No response on any standard frequencies. Try the quantum band, Neela suggested. If they responded to our beacon, they must monitor quantum communications. Moments later, a response came, simple text appearing on their screens. Prepare for our arrival. Hold your positions. Resistance is coming. Neela stared at the message. Friend or foe? Another threat or unexpected salvation? The mystery ships would arrive long before any Union forces could possibly reach them. 17 minutes, she repeated softly. We'll know soon enough. High above Nameless, the Saraki fleet had consolidated their position after destroying the planet's defenses. Their largest vessel, a massive harvester ship, hung in low orbit directly above the main settlement, deploying waves of smaller craft to transport captured biologicals and resources. The Saraki commander, a veteran of dozens of such raids, received the alert from his sensor officers with irritation. More ships approaching meant potential competition for the planet's resources. Union forces weren't due to arrive for days, according to their intelligence. Identify, he demanded. Unknown configuration, his subordinate replied. Not in our database. Numbers and capability? 6 vessels. Size comparable to our medium cruisers. Energy readings are unusual, difficult to quantify. The Saraki commander made a dismissive gesture with one of his secondary limbs. Likely independent operators or scavengers hoping to collect what we leave behind. Redirect Defense Squadron 3 to intercept. If they do not withdraw immediately, destroy them. 3 Saraki combat vessels broke from the main fleet and moved to confront the newcomers, weapons charging. They broadcast a simple message in common galactic trade language. This world is claimed by the Saraki Dominion. Depart immediately or be destroyed. No response came. The lead Saraki vessel fired a warning shot, a high-energy plasma bolt that should have passed close enough to demonstrate their firepower without actually striking the approaching ships. What happened next would be recorded by Saraki sensors and transmitted across their network, causing ripples of alarm throughout their vast territory. The plasma bolt, instead of passing near one of the dark vessels, seemed to vanish as though absorbed by some invisible field well before it reached its target. The dark ships continued their approach without changing course or speed. Enraged by this apparent disregard, the Saraki commander ordered a full attack. All 3 ships unleashed their primary weapons, devastating energy beams capable of crippling vessels twice their size. The dark ships finally reacted. They didn't attempt to evade. Instead, they seemed to briefly distort the space around them. The energy beams bent around their hulls, some dissipating harmlessly, others reflecting back toward their source. One of the Saraki vessels was struck by its own reflected weapon, its shields collapsing instantly. Before the Saraki could adjust their tactics, the lead dark ship emitted what appeared to be a focused pulse of energy unlike any weapon previously documented. It struck another Saraki vessel with surgical precision, somehow bypassing shields entirely and severing the ship's command section from its engineering compartment. Both sections began drifting, all systems apparently disabled. The third Saraki ship attempted to retreat, broadcasting distress signals to the main fleet. It made it less than 10,000 kilometers before another precise energy pulse left it dead in space, its systems offline. The entire engagement had lasted less than 30 seconds. On the Saraki command ship, the display showing the encounter caused immediate alarm. The commander mobilized his entire combat fleet, 23 ships strong, ordering them into defensive formation. All harvesting operations are suspended, he ordered. Recall ground forces immediately. Prepare for potential space combat. His executive officer hesitated. Commander, if these unknown vessels could so easily disable our advanced ships. We have numbers and firepower, the commander snapped. And we are Saraki. We do not retreat. On the planet's surface, Commander Rylan received the update from Neela with cautious optimism. Unknown ships have engaged the Saraki in orbit, he relayed to his team. They appear to be hostile to the invaders, not to us. Hold positions, but be prepared for anything. Before he could elaborate further, the Saraki forces attacking his position suddenly ceased their advance. Their commanders seemed to be receiving new orders, causing confusion in their ranks. They're pulling back, Rylan's second-in-command observed with disbelief. Not retreating, Rylan corrected, watching. Their movements. Regrouping. Something's changed their priorities. Indeed, the Saraki ground forces had begun consolidating into tighter units, establishing defensive positions rather than continuing their offensive operations. Their focus appeared to have shifted from capturing Aryans to securing their own positions and evacuation routes. High above, the dark ships closed with the main Saraki fleet. This time, the Saraki were prepared, firing coordinated volleys from multiple vessels simultaneously, creating an interlocking pattern of destructive energy that should have been impossible to evade or absorb. The dark ships responded by executing maneuvers that defied conventional physics. They moved in ways that suggested space itself bent around them, appearing almost to teleport short distances rather than travel through the intervening space. Energy weapons fired by the Saraki repeatedly missed their targets or were somehow redirected. The counterattack came with brutal efficiency. The dark ships emitted precisely targeted energy pulses that struck Saraki vessels at their most vulnerable points: weapon hardpoints, propulsion systems, command and control nodes. They weren't attempting to destroy the Saraki ships outright, but rather to systematically disable them. Within minutes, half the Saraki fleet hung powerless in orbit, while the others struggled to coordinate an effective defense against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. The Saraki commander watched in growing horror as his fleet was methodically neutralized. In all his centuries of raiding, he had never encountered anything like this. Not even the most advanced Union battleships could overwhelm Saraki defenses so completely. Recall all ground forces immediately, he ordered. Prepare the command ship for emergency FTL jump. But Commander, his executive protested, many of our forces are still planetside, and our captured specimens. They are forfeit, the commander interrupted coldly. Survival of the command structure takes priority. On Namalis's surface, the effects of this decision were immediately apparent. Saraki ground forces abruptly broke contact with the defenders and began racing toward their landing craft. What had been a methodical invasion suddenly transformed into a chaotic retreat. Commander Ryland didn't hesitate to take advantage of the situation. All units advance. Target their evacuation vessels. His remaining security forces emerged from their defensive positions, now pursuing the retreating Saraki. After hours of being hunted, the psychological effect of becoming the hunters galvanized the defenders. In the command center, Neela monitored the orbital battle with astonishment. The Saraki fleet is being systematically disabled, she reported to Rylan via comm. And, wait, we're detecting new signatures entering the atmosphere. More ships are coming down. Unlike the angular Siraki landing craft, these new atmospheric vessels descended with grace, their dark hulls briefly glowing red with atmospheric entry before cooling to their natural light-absorbing state. They touched down at strategic points throughout the settlement, particularly near areas where fighting was still ongoing. From these vessels emerged figures that at first glance appeared humanoid, though taller than average Aryans. They wore form-fitting armor of the same light-absorbing material as their ships, making their outlines difficult to focus on, as though they existed partially out of phase with normal space. They carried weapons unlike anything the colonists had seen. Not the brutal, organic-looking tools of the Siraki, but elegant devices that seemed to project focused fields of force rather than physical projectiles or energy beams. The newcomers moved with extraordinary speed and coordination, outflanking Siraki positions and neutralizing them with precision. They didn't seem to be killing the Siraki troops unless necessary, instead using their unusual weapons to immobilize or incapacitate. Commander Rylan found himself witnessing one such engagement firsthand. A squad of Siraki had cornered several of his officers in a collapsed building when 3 of the dark-armored figures simply appeared behind the Siraki position. Their weapons emitted pulses that seemed to distort gravity itself, leaving the Siraki soldiers floating helplessly or pinned to the ground by their own multiplied weight. One of the figures approached Rylan, its featureless helmet revealing nothing of the being inside. Then, to his surprise, the front of the helmet seemed to turn transparent, revealing a face that could almost pass for Aryan. Humanoid, with striking silver eyes and pale skin. Commander Rylan Oris? The figure asked in perfect Aryan language. Yes, Rylan answered cautiously. Who are you? Captain Althea Crane, United Hellion Fleet, the figure replied. We received your distress call. The evacuation of Namalus is no longer necessary. The Siraki threat will be neutralized shortly. Hellion, Rylan repeated, the name unfamiliar to him. Are you affiliated with the Galactic Union? Something like amusement flickered across Captain Crane's features. Once long ago, we have been absent from galactic affairs for some time. Your quantum beacon reached us. We decided to intervene. Before Rylan could ask further questions, Captain Crane received some form of communication through her armor. I must return to orbital operations. My ground teams will secure your settlement and provide immediate medical assistance. Your injured should be directed to these coordinates. She transferred data to Rylan's tactical unit, locations where Hellion medical teams were establishing treatment centers. Thank you, Rylan said, still processing the sudden turn of events. But why did you come? The Hellion are unknown to us. Captain Crane's expression turned solemn. We have been watching the Siraki for longer than you might imagine, Commander. Your distress signal provided an opportunity we had been waiting for. We will speak more when the situation is secure. With that, her helmet reopacified, and she moved with incredible speed back toward her vessel. In orbit, the battle, if it could even be called that, was concluding. The Siraki command ship had attempted to execute an emergency FTL jump, but somehow the Hellion vessels had projected a field that prevented the formation of the necessary spatial conditions for faster-than-light travel. Now all Siraki vessels hung dormant in Namalus orbit, their systems disabled, crews contained within their own ships. At Galactic Union headquarters, the assembly watched in stunned silence as long-range sensors captured the scene. What should have been a desperate holding action until Union forces could arrive had instead become a one-sided demonstration of technological superiority that made even the Union's most advanced military capabilities look primitive by comparison. What are we witnessing? The Tauran representative finally asked, his usually confident voice subdued. Admiral Jorix shook his head slowly. The complete neutralization of a major Siraki battle group by an unknown force using technology far beyond our current understanding. You said Hellion? Ambassador Laura Jin asked the communications officer. Search the archives. That name must appear somewhere. After several minutes, the officer reported back. There are limited references, Ambassador. The Hellion were apparently a member species of the early Union approximately 500 years ago. Following the Rigelian conflict, they withdrew from all Union affairs and effectively disappeared from galactic society. There was speculation they had either gone extinct or retreated to an isolated region of space. 500 years, Admiral Jorix mused. More than enough time for significant technological advancement, especially for a species already advanced enough for Union membership in that era. The question now, Ambassador Laura said, is whether they represent a new threat or a potential ally. If they can so easily defeat the Siraki, then they could likely defeat Union forces just as easily, the Tauran representative finished grimly. On Namalus, Dr. Neela Veris ventured from the command center for the first time in hours, escorted by Hellion soldiers to one of their medical facilities. The efficiency of their operation astounded her. In less than 2 hours, they had established fully functional field hospitals equipped with medical technology she could scarcely comprehend. Injured Aryans were being treated by Hellion medical personnel whose armor had adapted to become sophisticated diagnostic and treatment systems. Wounds that would have required days of regenerative therapy were being healed in minutes. Your medical technology is extraordinary, Neela remarked to the Hellion physician overseeing the facility. Standard field procedures, the physician replied modestly. We've had centuries to refine our approaches to trauma care. Why have we never encountered the Hellion before? Neela asked. A species with your capabilities would surely be known throughout the galaxy. The physician paused her work briefly. That is a discussion better had with our leadership. Captain Crane will be meeting with your colony's representatives once the situation is fully stabilized. I can tell you that our absence was deliberate, not accidental. Before Neela could press further, Commander Rylan entered the facility. His uniform was torn and scorched from battle, but he moved with renewed energy. Dr. Veris, he called. The Siraki have been completely neutralized. Their ground forces have either been captured or evacuated to their disabled ships. Casualties? Neela asked immediately. Rylan's expression sobered. We lost nearly half our security forces. Civilian casualties are still being assessed, but at least 2,000 confirmed dead, and perhaps 500 taken to Siraki ships before the Hellion arrived. The captives will be recovered, the Hellion physician interjected. Our teams are already boarding Siraki vessels to liberate prisoners and secure their biological containment units. Neela and Rylan exchanged a look of cautious hope. Perhaps some of their people could still be saved. A Hellion officer approached them. Captain Crane requests your presence at the central landing zone. Representatives from the Galactic Union have arrived and wish to meet with colony leadership. The Union? Rylan asked in surprise. Their nearest forces were days away. A small diplomatic vessel made an emergency FTL journey after observing our intervention, the officer explained. Captain Crane has granted them permission to land. At the designated meeting point, a sleek Union diplomatic shuttle had touched down under the watchful guard of Hellion soldiers. From it emerged Ambassador Laura Jen and a small entourage of Union officials, including a Tauran military attaché. Captain Althea Crane awaited them, now standing with her helmet removed. In full light, her appearance was striking. Humanoid, but with distinctions that marked her as something else. Her silver eyes seemed to shimmer with internal light, and her pale skin had an almost luminescent quality. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her posture perfect. Ambassador, she greeted Laura Jen formally. The United Hellion Fleet welcomes representatives of the Galactic Union. Laura Jen performed the traditional greeting gesture of her species. On behalf of the Union, I extend our gratitude for your intervention at Namalus. You have saved countless lives. And I, Rylan added as he and Neela approached, speak for all Aryans when I say we owe you our existence. Without your arrival, this colony would have been lost. Captain Crane acknowledged their thanks with a slight nod. The Siraki have been a destabilizing force in this sector for too long. Their practices are abhorrent. Biological harvesting, forced genetic experimentation on sentient beings. We could not allow it to continue once directly confronted with the evidence. If I may ask, Ambassador Laura ventured carefully, why have the Hellion remained hidden from galactic society for 5 centuries? Clearly, you possess technology that could benefit many worlds and peoples. A shadow crossed Captain Crane's face. History has taught us caution, Ambassador. After the Rigelian conflict, our ancestors witnessed how technological disparity often leads to either conquest or coerced sharing of advancements before cultures are ready to wield them responsibly. So you chose isolation? Neela asked. We chose observation, Crane corrected. The Hellion have not been absent, merely unseen. We have maintained outposts and monitoring stations throughout what you now call Union space, watching galactic civilization develop at its own pace. The Tauran military attaché spoke up, his voice barely concealing suspicion. You've been spying on the Union for 500 years. Crane regarded him calmly. We have been observing. There is a difference. We have never interfered in Union affairs or violated sovereign territories. Until today, the Tauran pointed out. Yes, Crane acknowledged. Today we made the decision to intervene because the quantum beacon, a technology we ourselves provided to the early Union, was activated in genuine desperation. The signal indicated that millions of lives were at immediate risk from a force we have long considered a threat to galactic stability. Ambassador Laura steered the conversation in a more diplomatic direction. What happens now, Captain Crane? Having revealed yourselves, do the Hellion intend to rejoin galactic society? Captain Crane looked thoughtful. That decision rests with our governing council. For now, our priority is securing Nameless and ensuring the Siraki understanding that this sector is now under our protection. And the Siraki prisoners? Rylan asked. What will become of them? They will be detained but treated according to established sentient rights protocols, Crane explained. Their ships will be neutralized but eventually returned to Siraki space with their crews, minus their command structure, who will face consequences for authorizing biological harvesting operations. The meeting continued as temporary shelters were erected around them. Hellion engineering teams had already begun assisting in rebuilding critical infrastructure, employing techniques that accelerated construction beyond anything the colonists had seen before. By nightfall, a United Union observer ship had arrived, followed shortly by the first elements of the rapid response force Admiral Jorix had dispatched. They found themselves in the unusual position of arriving as observers rather than rescuers. In a private meeting aboard the Hellion command vessel, Captain Crane revealed more to Neela, Rylan, and Ambassador Laura. The Hellion withdrawal 5 centuries ago was not solely due to the Rigelian conflict, she explained, displaying historical records. Our scientists had made breakthroughs in dimensional physics that far outpaced other Union species. We realized the potential for catastrophic misuse if these technologies proliferated before proper safeguards could be developed. So you removed yourselves from the equation, Neela surmised. Precisely. We established our own region of space, shielded by technology that makes it undetectable to conventional sensors. There, we continued our development without the pressure of military applications or commercial exploitation. Ambassador Laura leaned forward. And now, having revealed yourselves and demonstrated your capabilities so dramatically, you must realize the impact this will have throughout the Union. Some will seek alliance, others will fear you, and still others may see you as a threat to the established order. We are aware of the complications our emergence creates, Crane acknowledged. But perhaps it was inevitable. The galaxy is changing. The Siraki grow more aggressive, and other threats lurk beyond the Union's borders that you have not yet encountered. Other threats? Rylan questioned sharply. There are regions of space the Union has not yet explored, Crane said carefully. Not all that dwells in the darkness between stars is benevolent or even comprehensible by conventional standards. The Hellion have encountered entities that defy description in standard language. A chill settled over the room at her words. Are you suggesting the Hellion would serve as protectors? Ambassador Laura asked. No, Crane replied firmly. We have no desire to establish ourselves as galactic guardians or to create dependency. But we are prepared to share certain defensive technologies and knowledge that would help the Union better protect itself. In exchange for what? The Tauran attaché asked suspiciously. Respect for our continued sovereignty and autonomy, Crane said simply. We do not seek territory, resources, or political influence. We require only the freedom to continue our own development without interference. 3 days later, as Nameless began the long process of recovery, the impact of the Hellion intervention continued to ripple throughout galactic society. The Union Security Council had convened an emergency session to address the emergence of a technologically superior species within their midst. Dr. Neela Veras stood on the observation platform of the partially rebuilt command center, watching as Hellion engineers employed revolutionary techniques to accelerate the regeneration of damaged ecosystems. What would have taken decades was being accomplished in days. Remarkable, isn't it? Commander Ryland said, joining her. His uniform was now clean, but the haunted look in his eyes spoke of the trauma he had witnessed. Beyond remarkable, Neela agreed. Their environmental restoration technology alone could transform countless worlds suffering from ecological damage. The question is whether the Union will be able to maintain a peaceful relationship with them, Ryland mused. I've heard rumors from the Union representatives. Some factions are already advocating for a more aggressive approach to acquiring Hellion technology. Neela shook her head. That would be disastrous. You saw what 6 of their ships did to an entire Saraki fleet. Imagine what their full military capability might be. That's precisely what has some military leaders concerned, Ryland replied. The power imbalance is too great. It makes them nervous. Their conversation was interrupted as Captain Crane approached, accompanied by several Hellion officers and Ambassador Laura Jen. Dr. Veras, Commander Oris, Crane greeted them. I wanted to inform you personally that the Hellion fleet will be departing Nameless tomorrow. We've stabilized the situation and completed emergency restoration of critical systems. So soon, Neela couldn't hide her disappointment. A Union relief fleet will arrive within hours to continue the rebuilding efforts, Ambassador Laura explained. And Captain Crane has more pressing matters to attend to. Crane nodded. The Saraki response to our intervention has been concerning. They've begun mobilizing significant forces at several points along their territory. We need to ensure they understand that further aggression will not be tolerated. Will you engage them directly? Ryland asked, professional interest evident in his voice. Only if necessary, Crane replied. We prefer to establish boundaries through demonstration rather than open conflict. The Saraki must learn that certain behaviors, particularly biological harvesting of sentient species, will trigger immediate consequences. Ambassador Laura's expression was troubled. The Union Council remains divided on how to proceed with the Hellion revelation. Some see your emergence as an opportunity for unprecedented advancement and protection. Others fear us, Crane finished matter-of-factly. That is to be expected. Power differentials breed suspicion. It is why we remained hidden for so long. What would you have the Union do? Neela asked. Crane considered for a moment. Continue your own path of development. The Hellion did not intervene to dominate or to elevate the Union artificially. We responded to a genuine humanitarian crisis. Our preference would be to establish limited diplomatic relations while maintaining our general policy of non-interference in Union affairs. And the Saraki captives? Ryland inquired. What will happen to them? Those taken in biological harvesting raids have been recovered. All 523 of your people, Crane answered. Our medical teams have reversed much of the damage done to them, though some will require ongoing psychological support. As for the Saraki themselves, she continued, their rank and file will be returned to their territory with their disarmed vessels. Their leadership will face consequences for violations of sentient rights. We've already transmitted evidence of their activities to both the Saraki High Command and the Union Council. Later that evening, a formal ceremony was held in what remained of Namelis's Central Plaza. The surviving colonists gathered to express their gratitude to the Hellion forces. Rylan had organized a guard of honor from his remaining security personnel, while Neela presented Captain Crane with a specially crafted memorial, a crystalline structure containing the genetic patterns of Namelis's unique flora preserved in an artistic formation. So that even when you return to your hidden realm, Neela said as she presented the gift, you carry a piece of what you saved. Captain Crane seemed genuinely moved by the gesture. The Hellion do not seek monuments or recognition, Dr. Varys, but this gift honors us deeply. It will be placed in our historical archives as a symbol of this encounter. As the ceremony concluded, Ambassador Laura approached Crane with a formal proposal from the Union Council. Captain, the Council has authorized me to extend an invitation for Hellion representatives to attend a special assembly at Union headquarters. They wish to discuss potential areas of limited cooperation and to formally acknowledge your assistance at Namelis. Crane's expression remained neutral. I will convey the invitation to our governing council. I cannot guarantee acceptance, but I believe there may be value in establishing minimal diplomatic channels. That is all we ask. A beginning, Laura replied diplomatically. The following morning, the Hellion vessels prepared for departure. Their dark hulls hovering silently above the settlement created an awe-inspiring sight. Colonists gathered to watch, many still struggling to comprehend the events of the past week. Before boarding her shuttle, Captain Crane had one final conversation with Neela and Rylan. I've left you with something, she said, handing Neela a small, crystalline device similar to but more advanced than the quantum beacon, smoothly into the upper atmosphere before vanishing in a manner unlike any FTL jump Neela had ever witnessed. Not so much accelerating away as simply ceasing to exist in normal space. In the weeks that followed, Namelis began its recovery in earnest. Union Engineering Corps arrived with prefabricated structures and restoration equipment. The Hellion intervention had become the primary topic of discussion throughout Union space, with reactions ranging from relief to suspicion to outright fear. At an emergency session of the full Union Council, Ambassador Laura Jen addressed representatives from hundreds of member species. What we witnessed at Namelis was both miraculous and deeply unsettling, she began. A species that has observed us for centuries, possessing technology centuries beyond our most advanced developments, chose to intervene when called upon. They neutralized a threat we could not have countered in time, then departed without demanding territory, resources, or political concessions. The Tauran representative interrupted. And we are to believe their intentions were purely humanitarian? No species develops such military capability without ambition. Perhaps that is true of the Tauran, Laura replied evenly, but we cannot judge all species by our own cultural standards. The evidence suggests the Hellion value development and knowledge above expansion or domination. Admiral Jorix spoke next. Regardless of their motives, we must acknowledge reality. The Hellion possess military technology that could overwhelm our combined fleets if they chose aggression. The strategic question is not whether we can match them. We clearly cannot, but how we should position ourselves in relation to them. A representative of the ancient Vortian species, rarely active in Union politics, rose to speak. In the long history of our people, we have observed many technological disparities between species. When such gaps exist, three paths typically emerge. Conflict, in which the less advanced inevitably suffer. Subjugation, in which the advanced dominate the less advanced. Or mentorship, in which knowledge is gradually shared to elevate all. The Hellion have offered a fourth path, parallel development with limited interaction. This is unprecedented in our experience, but perhaps wisest for all concerned. The debate continued for days, but ultimately the Union Council adopted a measured approach. Establish formal diplomatic relations with the Hellion, accept limited technological sharing in defensive and humanitarian areas, and maintain vigilance without provocative actions. On Namelis, now 2 months after the Siraki attack, the colony had largely been rebuilt. Enhanced defensive systems donated by the Hellion protected the planet, and Union patrols maintained a constant presence in the system. Dr. Neela Veris had been appointed as the colony's new governor following her leadership during the crisis. On this particular evening, she stood with Commander Ryland in her office, reviewing the day's reconstruction reports. The last of the traumatized captives has been successfully treated, Ryland noted. The Hellion medical protocols were remarkably effective at reversing neurological damage from Siraki experiments. Good, Neela replied, her attention drawn to the crystalline communication device Captain Crane had left them. It sat in a secure container, its interior occasionally pulsing with soft light. Do you ever wonder, she asked, what might have happened if we hadn't activated the quantum beacon? If the Hellion had remained hidden? Ryland considered the question seriously. The colony would have fallen. Thousands more would have died or been taken for Siraki experiments. And the Union would have continued unaware of both the Hellion presence and these other threats Crane mentioned. Sometimes I wonder if we've merely exchanged one uncertain future for another, Neela mused. The Siraki have been pushed back, yes, but now the entire galaxy must reckon with the knowledge that a vastly superior civilization has been watching us all along. Does that frighten you? Ryland asked. Neela looked out the window at the rebuilt settlement, where Aryan colonists went about their lives beneath the stars. Strangely, no, she admitted. What I saw in the Hellion was not the cold calculation of conquerors, but the measured restraint of a species that understands the responsibility that comes with power. They could have dominated us. Instead, they rescued us and departed. For now, Ryland pointed out. For now, Neela agreed. But perhaps that's all any species can offer, their best intentions in the present moment. The future will unfold as it will. She picked up a report from her desk, the latest Union intelligence on Siraki movements. They had withdrawn from several contested sectors, consolidating their forces deeper within their territory. The demonstration of Hellion power had clearly affected their expansionist ambitions. When we sent that distress signal, Neela said softly, we couldn't have imagined what would arrive. What came horrified the galaxy, yes, but through that horror, we may have found something rare indeed. What's that? Ryland asked. A true protector, she answered. Not one that demands submission in exchange for security, but one that values life itself enough to defend it without conquest. Across the vastness of space, in a region undetectable by Union sensors, the Hellion Governing Council reviewed Captain Crane's full report on the anomalous intervention. The revelation of our existence cannot be undone, one elder noted. For better or worse, the galaxy now knows the Hellions still exist, and that our capabilities far exceed current Union technology. It was necessary, Captain Crane responded firmly. The Siraki biological harvesting had to be stopped, and the quantum beacon activation provided justified cause for intervention. The greater concern, another council member observed, is whether this marks the beginning of the pattern we have detected. Are the dimensional anomalies increasing as our models predicted? A senior scientist displayed a holographic representation of subspace distortions throughout the galaxy. The data is conclusive. The barriers between our reality and others are weakening. If the trend continues, within 50 years, incursions will begin. Neither the Hellion nor the Union can face this alone. Captain Crane studied the projection grimly. Then perhaps our emergence was not premature, but precisely timed. The Union must be prepared. They must understand what approaches. And if they cannot adapt quickly enough, an elder asked, then we will stand with them regardless. Crane answered without hesitation. The Hellion withdrew from galactic affairs to develop in peace, not to abandon our responsibility to sentient life. The council chamber fell silent as the implications settled upon them all. Their long isolation had ended. What had begun with a desperate signal from a small colony would ultimately reshape the future of all spacefaring civilizations. Far away on Namalus, Neela Veris stood beneath the night sky, the distant stars gleaming overhead. Somewhere among them, invisible but present, watched the civilization that had saved her world. And beyond them all, something else waited, unknown, perhaps unknowable, but approaching nevertheless. The distress signal had been sent. What arrived had indeed horrified the galaxy, not through malevolence, but through the dawning recognition of how small and vulnerable they truly were in the cosmic order. Yet in that vulnerability lay a new strength, the knowledge that they were not alone, and that sometimes, when called upon in desperate need, even the most mysterious forces in the universe might choose compassion over indifference. As Neela turned to walk back into the settlement, she carried that paradoxical comfort with her. The universe had proven more terrifying than they had imagined, and yet, somehow, less terrible than they had feared.